to another segment of the Grassy Knoll. You guys keep coming back for more. This is the 10th of January, 2007, and I got it right 2 days in a row. I'm so proud of myself. We're going to do a garage sale today, and joining us from Utica, where winter has given notice that it is back, is Andy Sr. from the Uticans for 9/11 Truth. And what is the story up in Utica?
Well, we finally got winter here. It was avoiding us for about a month, but we finally got hit.
And what are you bound for? How many?
Maybe up to a foot. So we're up to our shins in it at this point.
Yeah, I can feel the pain. Believe me.
Yes, I know you can.
All right. Before we get into stuff about Flight 93, you're familiar with the Onion, right, Andy?
Oh yeah.
And most people out there are. Most of us have probably been scammed at least once by it before we got hip to what it's about. But there was a story coming out of MSNBC, I guess it was, yesterday, about something I thought should have been on the Onion, but it was a straight story. And, of course, having grown up in this state, there was a complex that went along with it, inferiority-wise. The headline reads, New York City eyes New Jersey for odor source. The subhead, smell is gone. Officials say it could have come from industrial waterfront. And I guess we all heard about this. And by the way, were there a couple other wacky things that went on that day? Bird kills down in Austin?
Yes, in Austin of all places.
And was there something in Miami also?
I don't know. I was
all right.
too busy looking at other things, but yeah, the bird kills, and it's strange. It was. I wonder if this wasn't just some sort of a weird thing going on, because I don't know. They've got the new Congress in. Maybe they want people to feel nervous.
Yeah, it seemed like a freak out Monday or something. Somebody said something about discovering some kind of C4 explosives in Miami. That came from a listener, so. But I haven't heard anything about a major bird kill for years. I don't know if you remember or not when people in Tennessee had complained that something like that occurred near Marysville, and some kind of pulse went through the town and blew out phones and everything else. That was the last of the major bird kills I remember. Anyway, it says here the gas-like odor that hung over Manhattan streets was gone Tuesday, but city officials were still trying to pinpoint its source and eyeing New Jersey. Charles Sturkin, the spokesman for the City Department of Environmental Protection, said Tuesday that his agency was pretty sure the source of the smell was along New Jersey's industrialized waterfront just across the Hudson River from New York. Sturkin said, the way we tracked the dispersion of the smell and the prevailing winds indicates that it came from New Jersey, somewhere near Secaucus. Now, just a couple of things. Secaucus is not on the waterfront. It is on the other side of that peninsula that's created by the Hudson to the east and the Passaic and the Hackensack River joining together, and Secaucus is out in the kind of marshland there. In fact, it's pretty interesting because all that area in there was once a tremendous, apparently, cypress stand that none less than Captain Kidd used to go in there and hide from the British. Take his boat up there. Of course, he did get captured and was hung from a cage down at the Battery.
Yes, and since then they've called people being hung going to Secaucus.
Well, see now, the interesting about Secaucus is, in the old days, it had at least one, and may have had more, slaughterhouses. And so, when you were down in Secaucus, and I remember this expressly in the mid-'60s, when you're done with what you're doing, you burn the remnant of the animal, and it just smelled like a kind of a rotten barbecue. And so we used to always kid around, about Secaucus and the smell, so now when they say this, it kind of harkens back to that time, but Secaucus is not on the Hudson waterfront, and has certainly been gentrified since those days. But I got to tell you one thing, Andy. They had a squabble in New York and New Jersey about who really should own the Statue of Liberty.
Yes.
And if you look at a map, you can see certainly that they deeked to the west to incorporate Staten Island, Liberty Island, inside the New York boundary. But you see, to me, that shouldn't have been a fight. I didn't care if New York wanted it. What bothered me was I wanted them to turn the statue facing north to the George Washington Bridge with her back to the bay, mainly because what bugged me was when you're in Jersey, she was holding up her torch arm to you, which means you had to look at her armpit all the time. So I thought it was only fair that let them, if they want it, then let them face the armpit.
Well, maybe that was some sort of subtle commentary, though. What I say to New York City is, let he who dealt it...
Yeah, right. There you go. And so, yes, it's just not fair. But we never got the statue, and they never turned her around. All right, now, about Flight 93, I made a couple of phone calls this morning, just to dispel what seems to be generally accepted rumors. Now, I'm going to read, and I think you have some of these accounts that occurred the day after.
Yeah, I also got some off that one website you mentioned.
All right.
Yes.
Now, if these accounts are accurate, and just like what you see on TV or don't see on TV or hear on the radio anymore, these are first accounts that they can't manage. They get out, and then after the fact, they start to manage the news. With, obviously, newspapers, it's in print. They can never really get back to that, whereas, you know, with all the video clips from network news talking about explosions and 9/11, you'll never see again.
Yeah, they've disappeared down the memory hole, most definitely.
Yeah, they'll never come back. In fact, if people could witness, 15 to 20 minutes worth of what was said down there to the alphabet networks, they would have a very different impression about what took place that day, especially as it applies to New York City, which was the only event that was really being watched. But here's the situation. Why Flight 93 can't be a shoot-down. If these accounts are correct, none of them, and we'll go through them, talk about the plane having an event on board. No smoke streaming from it. Now, if an airliner is hit by a heat seeker, it'll go to an engine. And it's already happened. I was just talking to Pete, the pilot, this morning, and he was referring to one that had taken a hit, and they landed. The plane does not get dropped out of the air, and you can fly it under somewhat control to wherever you have to, hopefully the closest destination.
Well, with one engine, yeah, you can fly a plane, and they can land it. If you're somewhat of a good pilot, you could land a plane with one of the two giant jet engines.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so this takes a shot on and usually it seems for whatever reason to be the starboard engine. If it takes a hit, it can keep going. It's not going to drop out of the sky. In fact, he was telling me about a situation where there was an event, it might have been a SAMI, I can't remember, where the hydraulics were knocked out on a plane and they were still able to land it, which is kind of miraculous. And what has to be understood is this. The only plane that's fly-by-wire, electronic, is the Airbus. All these planes that supposedly were flown remotely, and they may have, if they were 757 models or 767 models, they had to be adapted to be flown remotely because they are hydraulic. They are not fly-by-wire. So
there had to have been some sort of servo mechanism controlling a unit within the plane to control the hydraulic aspect of it.
Well, first of all, they're flown remotely. I don't believe there's anybody on the planes. And I can't see a crew for the first time in their careers walking in and being or finding out on a walkabout that this plane happens to be rigged to fly remotely. Now, there are remote systems that have been around for a while. They go back to 1988, and they were talked about also in the New York Times afterwards about they did a spin on it. Well, how can we outfit the planes to take the control away from the pilot should the cockpit be invaded? When in essence they could do it anyway. But they were more or less supplying this as an antidote for future terrorist attacks and the takeover of crews. So, they've been a little disingenuous about that because that remote system has been around for quite some time. But anyway, you cannot just jump into 757 and 767 and have it be remotely taken over. Can't happen.
So it would definitely have to be souped up by some mechanic, somebody who knew what he was doing and. Yes, it's just like a remote car starter. It works with some cars you can't put them on. If you've got a carburetor, you can't put a remote starter on. If you've got fuel injection, more likely so. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm not saying. To me, I believe they were remote. I believe three out of three were remotes, and who knows what happened with the Pentagon. And we'll get more into why I think I haven't asked you where you come down on this because that's why we're talking today.
I've been reading this stuff for a day or two now, and I am more confused now than I've ever been in my life on any particular topic. This stuff it's like the blind man and the elephant. There are many more questions here than answers. I don't know how anybody can go through this stuff and say they know what happened. It's just there's so many contradictions. Yet I think that there are some real things that really that New York would accuse of coming from Secaucus on this, to be metaphorical. Some of it's really really off, and the newer rumors that are coming out, or the newer research that's been being propounded by Dave McGowan is interesting. I've read his series on this subject, and I think he's got one more installment to go.
Right.
And that would be at Dave's Web, DAVES.CNCHOST.com, CNChost.com, and there's a whole series there on that would be Act 4. And I've been reading his things, and he's talking about, and he goes back to saying the cell phones are possible. He says the cell phones. He says a guy named Ed Felt. Now, this has some significance for us up in this area because Ed Felt was born in Clinton, New York, which is where I do my radio program up at Hamilton College. He was a Cornell graduate. Apparently, he was a computer wizard. His wife said about him that he would, as a college freshman, her husband would become animated talking about computers, encryption techniques, or chaos theory, all while drawing diagrams and graphs on napkins. So this guy was a 4-star computer nerd who knew all the stuff. He was a genius, and that would have been like 20 years ago. He was talking about that stuff. So, or let's say, like more than that even now, because that was from 6 years ago, that paper. So this guy was the guy who apparently was talking to the 911 operator from the bathroom in the bulkhead inside the aluminum tube on a cell phone as it was going 500 miles an hour, screaming out of the sky, saying there's smoke and I think there's a bomb and all this other stuff. And I wonder about and also he wound up working for BEA Systems, which turns out to be involved in military intelligence and involved with DARPA. So, the more questions here. I mean, this guy, if he's dead, maybe they killed him, who knows? But maybe they didn't kill him. I don't want to get into Tom Flacco type stuff here, but this stuff, it just raises more questions. Because this guy, like Todd Beamer, Todd Beamer, who was involved with Oracle, another CIA group, and of everything else, are these guys alive or dead? Did they get killed in this flight, or were they killed somewhere else, or are they working in a bunker somewhere on secret stuff that we'll never know about until it's too late? So this is a guy who purportedly made the telephone call to the 911 operator. And the other thing is that none of these calls have been recorded by anyone.
Yeah.
None of these calls have any existence except as hearsay or reportage or rumor. And yet, McGowan is saying that this is the case. And of course, he talks about it's offensive to like the relatives to suggest that anything other than the official version is, which basically is that they tangled with some hijackers, happened. Now, I'm thinking about this, and I really do. I respect the families, and I respect that people there was something that was going on that day. Yet, I also really, really question what is being put forth. It's extremely troubling to see this sort of stuff and say, oh yes, this must have happened because this, and this. Now, you're talking about the bombs and everything, but let's go back to the the initial reports from the New York Times and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette of that day of what eyewitnesses on the ground saw the plane doing.
Remember one thing too. Felt was the one again who supposedly said there was a bomb on board,
Yes.
or an explosion had taken place.
Yes.
Now, reading Dave's website and such, he said, "Well, why would you do that?" And my thought was that because it would still put in the mind of people that an event had taken place, and that this plane had problems no matter what. I mean, it's just another match in the gas vat for a troubled plane. It might also be construed by the public, and deliberately so, to let the public connect the dots for themselves and say, maybe that was the shoot down. So, okay, now, that's why I think that might have been important. Now, Felt has a very interesting past, in a sense, being involved with the DOD contractor. You also have Beamer working for Oracle.
Yeah.
And Glick, some stuff has been said about that, too. I can't corroborate it, that he actually had summered out in Indian Lake. The site of supposedly some of the debris fields, but be that as it may. So we're contending that there is no shoot down. And secondly, if it's agreed that the Shanksville crater is just that, then that isn't a crash site. That's a deliberate falsified site, which means you don't have hijackers on board, and you don't have a shoot down, because if you've gone to the trouble, and I mean this is only where I'm extrapolating logically, if you've gone to the trouble to create a false site, there must be a real site. Or maybe no other site. But that isn't the site, and therefore no hijackers and no shoot down, because you could not control the plane. All right, do we go into the accounts then?
Yes.
All right, on the 11th, the first batch came out. And it says a witness, Paula Pluta, this is from the New York Times, who lives about a mile from the crash scene, said she had been watching Little House on the Prairie in her living room at 10:15 when she heard a loud rumbling sound that left her house vibrating. She said she went to her porch and saw the plane dip sharply at a 60-degree or 70-degree angle as it flew southward and fall to the earth behind a line of trees. A fireball ballooned as high as 100 feet above the tree line. Mrs. Pluta said she did not see any smoke or fire coming from the plane before it crashed. Witness number 2, Terry Butler, was working in a salvage yard about a half mile from the eventual crash site when he said he saw a jetliner flying just above the treetops. Mr. Butler said he knew something was odd because of the plane's low altitude and the fact that he had just heard on television that all flights nationwide had been grounded. He said it was entirely too low, entirely too fast. He watched for about 10 seconds as the plane seemed to try, and this is what, to me this means something. I'm only going to throw this out thinking that this might have been an adjustment in a remote flight. It said he watched for about 10 seconds as the plane seemed to try to gain altitude before making a sharp right-hand turn and nosediving into the open field. Rick Yock, a bartender at the Indian Lake Resort 2 miles from the crash site, said, "My mom and I were sitting at home watching the news on TV. We had seen the first explosion on TV, and then the second one, and the Pentagon, and then a few minutes later, there was this incredible shockwave that hit the house. It was undoubtedly a massive explosion. I thought after watching what I saw on TV, the power went off, the TV went out, the phones were dead. The only thing I would assume is that we were under attack. What's the first thing terrorists do? And that is knock out your communications." Well, there wasn't anything really too revealing about that. Now, do we go on? We have Rodney Peterson and Brandon Leventry, auto mechanics at a Ford dealership in nearby Boswell. We're crossing Main Street about 10 Tuesday morning when they noticed a jetliner appearing to lumber through the sky about 2,000 feet. "Check that plane out," Mr. Peterson said, recall telling Mr. Leventry, noticing that the engine seemed to be throttled back. Both men said the aircraft then dipped sharply to the left, then to the right, casting a blinding glare from the sun. "Something ain't right," he said. The plane leveled off but began descending away from the airport. 5 minutes later, he learned that the plane had crashed. All right, Terry Butler at the Stoystown Auto Wreckers saw the jetliner about 500 feet off the ground. Mr. Butler and Mr. Peterson, and I would believe this is a different one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Said they saw no other plane near the jetliner and no smoke or fire coming from it. The jetliner appeared to gain altitude as it passed over a ridge, again referring to this last ascension, but then made a sharp right turn and disappeared over a tree line. Rob Kimmel, a truck driver, said he was in his garage in Stoystown when he saw the jet bank hard to the right, only 100 or 200 feet off the ground. And what's happening is this plane is flying a little bit, well, south-southeast. You're hearing people say, okay, it looked like 2,000, looked like 600, 500, 200. And he said also it crested a hill to the southeast. Again, this ascension. I saw the top of the plane, not the bottom, Mr. Kinnell said. And just two more. One, the next to last one. The last person on the ground to see the plane may have been, well, here's Paula Pluta again. And she says about the same thing. And, of course, there's another gentleman that Jim Brandt said that was like a nuclear bomb, which if they shot ordnance in the ground to create that crater, maybe that's why we have that famous mushroom cloud that McClatchy apparently photographed, or maybe didn't photograph, and not this asymmetrical fire that you would get from, obviously, a crash with the fuel spills all over the ground and that goes up in a plume. Mr. Brandt said of his two of his employees arrived at the site in minutes hoping to find survivors. He said he noticed a white plane, perhaps a jet, circling the wreckage. It reminded me of a fighter jet, he said. Mr. Crowley said he could neither confirm nor deny reports that an F-16 had been in the area, and Crowley is the FBI agent. So there you have a number of accounts. Not one of them says anything was streaming from the plane with regard to smoke or having taken a shot to an engine or an explosion inside the cabin. Now, if that is the case, again, you don't have a shoot-down. You don't have an event inside the plane. And we still have this crater. And do you want to speak to the crater at all?
Well, basically, I was talking to a friend of mine last night who actually got it after, and he was, and he might even be listening today, which would be nice. He said basically it was like a hole that had been dug and garbage had been dumped into it, and there was nothing there to be found. They couldn't find any significant wreckage in the crater at all.
Well, you know, anybody can go to flight93crash.com or the Killtown website. And Killtown especially has collated a great deal of eyewitness accounts that, you know, are there at the day and the day after. And then they go on, you know, to like a year or two later. And that's when it seems that the further you get away from the event, the more revealing, supposedly, the accounts are. And it just seems like they saw more of bodies, they saw more of plane parts. Everything seems to become more normal, where in the beginning, nobody was talking about any of this. Now, they've got this
time to get used to the story.
Well, they've got all time, yeah, they can do anything they want. I mean, as you get away after a week or so, that's when the management's going to start taking place. And so then you have to look at and judge whether or not there's less veracity with the accounts that come further and further from the time. Now, let me just say this now, too. Folks, if you want to make a comment or ask a question, go ahead. I mean, it's, you know the drill. It's by email, go to Vyzygoth@hotmail.com, or you can use MSN IM service, and that would be Vyzygoth, if you want to jump in here. But one of the things, and I'm also going to say that I spoke to Lisa Giuliani this morning, because they're the last people with whom we did a lot on 93.
Yes, that was in May, I think, because I just heard that show earlier.
What do you mean, the marathons, or?
Actually, no. I actually downloaded it when you had it up on your site, and I listened to part 2 of the thing from early May 1990. Last year, earlier on, with the where they had just gone back to Shanksville after the book came out.
Right.
And he was on. Victor was on talking about the stuff, and it was a great program, and he was talking about that. Yes, I just heard that. Well,
you know, here's one of these things where it gets better as time goes on, and this is from Lisa Giuliani's articles. It said, this is from Bob Schmucker, quote, the ambassador of Flight 93 Temporary Memorial. She states, Bob told us that the entire fuselage of Flight 93, now get this, okay? Bob told us that the entire fuselage of Flight 93 had been pulled from the crater. Yeah, that's 155 feet, huh? Describing it as, quote, looking crumpled up like aluminum foil when they took it out. He told us 3 local excavating companies were used to dig out whatever was allegedly in the smoking hole, and the excavators had gone as deep as 50 feet. He could not or would not name them. Schmucker stated that we had valid, serious questions, and he directed us to speak to Somerset coroner and funeral director Wally Miller, who appears to us to be the point man in this whole mess. Schmucker also stated that a mound on the property allegedly contains both human remains for Flight 93 and ground tree limbs. He cited Wally Miller as the source of this information. This mound is located within the fenced-in area adjacent to the temporary memorial, behind the spot where the crater used to be. The crater is now completely filled in and inaccessible to the public. In fact, they don't even want you walking up to the fence line.
Amazing. No, it's true. Why?
Well,
it's like letting people up into the school book depository. I remember Bill Hicks saying that he went up there and he just said, there's just no way it could have been him. There's no way it could have been Oswald. And he did a whole routine on that. But yeah, the closer you get to the real scene and you see what happened and what it might look like, and of course time erases everything, and they've totally landscaped the area now, probably.
Well, I tell you what, if you go to MapQuest and you punch in, just say New Baltimore or Shanksville, PA, and you hit the maps, you can locate the site. I did it early this morning. You can find out exactly where it is. If you use Killtown's resources, they will show you an aerial view. In fact, there's two of them there, and also basically one that's got superimposed on it the road, the major roads, and one of them is Lambertsville Road, and Skyline Road is the other one. You can look at that site, and you can see exactly where it happened. And yes, things have changed. You'll see a gouge in the trees so that the tree line is somewhat broken, where once it was just kind of like smooth and curved. There's a gouge out of it, and that apparently is where most of the fire was. But the thing about the hole is, a couple of things. You're not going to lose an airliner into a hole. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
No.
And there's no bodies around whatsoever. Everything gets atomized. But there's no reason in the world that atomization, which has never taken place as far as anybody knows with an airliner, would especially take place if a plane drops from 2,000 feet. Now, when you get it
200 feet.
Well, here's the other thing. It is also nearly impossible, or certainly stressful, to a plane if you were going to fly at 500 miles per hour, or about 350 knots, anywhere around 500 feet, or rather 200 feet or so, because it's just too difficult. You've got a denser atmosphere to deal with. It's different than when you're up top at 35,000. You would shake the crap out of the plane. It would max out at a certain speed. It would not be a good thing to have happen. Whenever they throw in these, well, at every site, they're talking about the planes hitting the towers at 500 miles an hour. They're talking about the plane hitting the Pentagon at 500 miles an hour. And they talk about this plane hitting, 500 miles an hour seems to be the default mileage, miles per hour. But the thing is, so what's the point? Is that supposed to be fast? It still doesn't matter. And I went back to take a look at that Russian jetliner that crashed in the Ukraine. 35,000 feet, and man, there are bodies all over the place. There's fuselage, everything, and the two Honkin engines, one of which they said bounced away from the crater. So, you've got something that this plane supposedly submerged into like it was quicksand. And it's crazy.
Yes, if you've got a jet engine and it falls in your backyard, you know it. You've got a huge piece of metal there. And it's got like titanium and stuff. How can that stuff does not disappear. It does not turn to vapor of its own volition. It does not do that. And bodies, it takes hours to cremate a body. It takes hours to reduce a body to ash. And despite whatever, it doesn't happen instantaneously unless you've got a nuclear blast.
Yeah. And of course, again, if you go to Killtown, it's not worth reiterating everything that's there, but you'll find all of a sudden how Miller, the coroner, had identified, I guess, a dozen bodies or so without using DNA, and then had to finally use DNA. He said he was using, I guess one of the things was fingerprints, but everybody says there was just nothing but charred everything around and only little bits and pieces of this and that, so I don't even know how he found a hand to get a print off a finger. Here's another thing, too, again from Lisa Giuliani. Greg Chappelli, Somerset Hospital Director of Media Relations, advised us that the Somerset Hospital received no bodies from the purported crash of Flight 93 on 9/11. We asked him if he knew of any area cordoned off in New Baltimore by the feds and state police, and he denied knowledge of this. I asked him if he knew of any phone calls made to Somerset Hospital on the morning of 9/11, during which ER personnel were advised to prepare to receive victims from two separate plane crashes. He was silent for a moment and stated he was unaware of any such call. He then proceeded to tell us that he felt very uncomfortable talking to us and would need to check us out and get clearance before he could speak any further. We asked him why he needed to, quote, check us out before he could talk to us about 9/11, and he replied, I have never heard of you. I need to check you out first. We provided him with our business cards for this purpose. We couldn't get him to say anything else except that he would contact us once he checked out who we were and what we do. Not surprisingly, we haven't heard from him at this point, so I will now be giving him a call to follow up. Now, here, more on New Baltimore. Now, if you go to the map and you take a look at where these communities are laid out, New Baltimore is probably the furthest away from all the places that were involved with supposed debris, away from the Shanksville crater, away from whatever happened at Indian Lake, whatever debris found its way there. You'll also hear that some people found stuff in other places.
Yeah.
All right, do you want to speak to that before I go any further?
No, go ahead.
All right, and then you got New Baltimore, which is far to the southeast of all these sites, but would seem to be on a tangent should that plane continue its northwest to southeast travels. This is something they checked out, and this is what's been, I wouldn't say haunting them, but very problematic. They approached a Pennsylvania State Police corporal by the name of Bunsich. They asked him if he had any information regarding an area of New Baltimore being cordoned off by the FBI and state police on 9/11. He did not deny that this may have happened, but said that they had to report to any and all areas where debris wreckage remains had been reported on the morning of 9/11 and the days that followed. When asked if we could see copies of the state police reports, he stated there were no reports filed by the state police regarding 9/11, which we found most peculiar. No reports filed by the state police. We were told that the FBI had taken charge of the crash site and investigation, and that they were the information gatherers. Bunsich, with a knowing smile, coyly suggested we inquire with the FBI, adding that they would most likely be uncooperative with us. Thanks for the encouragement. So again, you have a situation, something going on with New Baltimore. Another thing that I find just curious. All right, now, I don't know what dropped around Indian Lake. I mean, they all claim that they heard this roar overhead, which would indicate it's the plane,
Yes.
though the plane would have never gone overhead of Indian Lake. If you see where it was coming from and where it dropped,
Yes.
it dropped to the west of Indian Lake.
Which would have been the Shanksville is, somewhat to the west of Indian Lake. And if there was a debris field toward Indian Lake, and they found stuff, I guess somebody had said, or was on in one of the McGowan pieces, that they fished about a garbage bag full of debris out of Indian Lake. And perhaps there was more than that, who knows? But that if the plane went down in Shanksville, what the heck was in Indian Lake? If it went right over the trees and dipped and landed in a crater, or if they said it went down above the tree line. So what happened there, and how did all that stuff get in Indian Lake?
When they drew the schematic for the article about the eyewitnesses in the New York Times, you have a slight northwest-southeast progression of the plane, and that's how they also offer the eyewitness testimonies. Boswell, for instance, being up in Boswell, Rodney Peterson being the first at 2.5 miles, and then you get down to Stoystown, where it was a mile, and then you get down to a half a mile, and then finally you get down to the crash site. It doesn't go over Indian Lake whatsoever. It stays to the west of Indian Lake. So what in the world flew over Indian Lake, or what dropped it? Who knows? Obviously, it would seem to indicate there was a mid-air event, but that cannot be. None of the eyewitnesses are correct about what they saw. Now, what also is interesting is that there's runways at Indian Lake. I don't know what that means, but there are airplane runways out at Indian Lake. I don't know. I don't know if a drone was up there and shot down. They talked about more than one jet. They talked about two. Could that have been a possibility? It might have been. I mean, that's very compelling. But it doesn't seem like it came from Flight 93. Once again. The other thing is that these people actually saw an airliner. I mean, it went down someplace, but it didn't go down in Shanksville. It didn't go down into Indian Lake or anywhere near it. Nobody really knows where it went. Everybody refers in the mainstream stories that it went down into the Shanksville crater, which it did not do. So where did it go down, and how did they so neatly and quickly get rid of it? Which, again, I think tends to support the fact that it was a remote flight because there were no bodies to clean up. What you had to do is get the aluminum tubes out of there and the engines. Still, it's not an easy task to do. But, you know, again, Lisa and Victor tend to think that something did happen in New Baltimore, and where it happened, there was also quick access to the Pennsylvania Turnpike. If you're carting things off, I don't know. So that's problematic, but it sure ain't it sure isn't in the Shanksville crater.
Well, if anything did happen there, and if there was access to the Turnpike, then they would have done as they did in New York, which was to clean up the crime scene as quickly as possible to get rid of the evidence.
Right, and then here again, when they asked the corporal from Pennsylvania State Troopers if he would confirm or deny whether there was something happening up in New Baltimore, whether there was obviously personnel waiting to accept whatever event took place there, you have to wonder if there was a black op team there willing to, that was there knowing it would drop. And that's the reason why I'm saying it would be a remote. If you had to drop this thing exactly where it was supposed to be, you can't have hijackers on it, and you can't have the thing limping along, having taken a missile, for a potential shoot down. Can't do it.
Yes, and with a remote system, this is a speculation might be that the so-called white jet or the fighter jet that people saw, the mysterious white jet, might have been tailing the thing closely in order to work to bring the thing down remotely in a specific location, and they were close by in order to oversee that. Although they probably could also do that from satellites, but I don't know if that would be quite as accurate or whatever. But having that's one other possibility that ought to be discussed. That there was a remote. The remote control was being worked from the jet, just like some of the things that when people said they saw helicopters around the World Trade Center right before it came down. What were they doing then?
Yep.
It does beg more questions than it answers. It really does become more puzzling and more enigmatic the more you delve into it, because there are fewer answers and more questions. And again, will anybody ever know what happened?
This is heavy speculation. I don't know how much more light we're shedding on this for people. The one thing I talked to Victor and Lisa about, and I talked to a pilot up in Pennsylvania about the possibility of doing this, and that would be to, charter a flight, get a flight plan wherever, and I wouldn't say where it would come out from where the flight would originate from, and overfly the area, especially in the late winter or early spring. Perhaps maybe a little snow cover wouldn't be bad. But what I was wondering was, if this plane did go down someplace out of view, at least from a horizon view, is there any kind of sign of an impact that might have cut down, I wouldn't say it's primordial forest, but long-standing perhaps evergreens or other trees? If you could overfly the area, would you see someplace that looked like obviously something had been cut down there? Now, it's been 6 years. Who knows? The other thing is, there is a statement about being a military flight corridor, whatever that means. That could be a problem. And two, you're not going to be able to circle or stay around too much longer in one spot, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So to do an aerial reconnaissance would obviously be the least labor-intensive, but you only probably get one shot on it. Secondly, if you were to do it by foot, I mean, Lord knows where it's going to take you. And it could be a lot of effort and little gain because obviously you can't see the forest of the tree, literally. But there's also, strange contradictions in some of these articles, even within the same article.
Yes.
And there's one thing that struck me. It said a crash debris found 8 miles away from the Tribune Review by Deborah Erdley. And like, for instance, in paragraph 2, it says, a southeasterly wind and a 3-year-old's keen eye brought the crash of United Airlines 93 home to the family in the tiny New Baltimore borough, more than 8 miles from the Somerset County crash site. Okay, New Baltimore again, 8 miles away from the site. A southeasterly wind that blew the supposed debris, right? Later in the article, it said, late yesterday afternoon, FBI Special Agent Bill Crowley again, said experts from the National Transportation Safety Board had checked weather reports and determined that lightweight materials might well have traveled over the mountain by a southwest wind that reached a total speed of 9 knots. So he's talking about a southwest wind, and up here we have a southeast wind. Well, from where that site is, from where that crash site is, I would say that I'm just going to take another look at this. Looking at these maps, if it were now, when you talk about wind direction, the direction is where the wind is coming from. When they say it's a southwest wind, it's coming from the southwest. If it's a southeast wind, it's coming out of the southeast. From that crater, if there was a southeast wind, it would blow it away from Indian Lake. If it were a southwest wind, and this all could take place, there's a possibility. Except the site itself is still a little bit to the northern part of the lake. I'd say it's in the upper northern half of the lake and that whole complex there.
Yeah,
so,
toward Buckstown,
yeah. Oh, yeah, and there's another good one about that we'll come to. But here you have a contradiction about the wind and such, and I mean, sure, reporters can make mistakes, people can make mistakes, but I can't understand, especially in the case of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, when you had Cindy Lash as reporter on most of these stories, how something didn't come out of this unless she chose not to say anything about some of the contradictions she had to be hearing. And here's one of the glaring ones, and you know where I'm going to go with this one. This I really don't understand. This is with the Eric Peterson. He said there was a crater in the ground that was really burning. There were pieces of fuselage and clothing all over the area, burning. He said he didn't see any debris longer than a couple of feet long. See, it's always like they always throw that in, a couple of feet, 2 feet. But I mean, how do you know it was clothing then? I mean, how do you know it was fuselage? It was burning especially. How do you know that? But then it gets better. It said the plane crashed in a ravine near an abandoned strip mine in what some witnesses described as a fireball. The site is between Shanksville and Buckstown, near Diamond Tea Coal Company in Freedens. Now, this even gets stranger. Now, I'm surprised that this wasn't a clarification, because Freedens is way the heck northwest of Shanksville.
Yes.
Now, is there a Diamond Tea Coal Company there? Yes. However, and they also are owned by, what's the company from where Purball came from? It starts with an R word. Roll something or...
Yeah, I have that here somewhere.
All right, take a look for it, because that company is the parent company for Diamond Tea. And obviously they're adjacent to the crash site in Shanksville.
Purball. I found Purball here. Okay. He says that he was working for Rowlett Incorporated.
Right. That
scrapyard on the ridge overlooking the point of impact, less than half a mile away. And he was the Purball stuff is really strange, because this guy was saying really odd things. I heard this real loud noise coming over my head, he told the Daily Mirror. I looked up and it was Flight 93, barely 50 feet above me. It was coming down in a 45-degree and rocking side to side. Then the nose suddenly dipped and it just crashed into the ground. There was this big fireball and then a huge cloud of smoke. Now, if it was 50 feet over his head and it crashed at a 45-degree angle, he would have been dead.
Well,
he would have been killed because it would have been right next to him.
Right. And so, but how do you explain? The site is between Shanksville and Buckstown, near Diamond Tea Coal Company and Freedom's. And it's not. Freedom's is not between Shanksville and Buckstown. It is way, way off to the west.
It's right on 281 on this map, which is, yes, it's about 6 miles away. It's way off.
Yeah, I mean, that just makes no sense. And then the other thing he explains, and he's one of two people I think that do it, and again, if you ask a commercial air pilot, they're going to tell you this is impossible. It's a badly written paragraph, but paragraph 3 in this Post-Gazette article entitled "Debris Field Spread Over an Area the Size of a Football Field," this is what it states. And this is bad English, but this is the way it goes. As it, meaning Flight 93, as it went over, started going end over end, Peterson said, and then dropped below a tree line and exploded. Peterson saw a flash and then a mushroom cloud of smoke. Planes do not go end over end. I mean, if anybody knows what a tumbler pigeon does, that's end over end. That's tail, tail out over the nose. Okay, this isn't wing over wing, and that's not possible. It's not possible. So now, what is that all about?
Plane ever designed to do that maneuver? It's a barrel roll. It's a nose to tail, like tumbling.
Well,
it couldn't happen.
No, it can't. When I asked Pilot Pete, I read this to him. He said to me, "Hold on." He goes, "Is this plane supposedly whole?" I went, "Yeah." He goes, "No way." Now, this is Pilot Pete who doesn't want to know about conspiracies, but like I said, he's going to tell the truth about physics as he understands them in aerodynamics. So, I mean, that whole thing also was a stinker. And what is that all about? So, no, end over end, and that wasn't the only one. But again, we don't have any statements that say that this plane was on fire. So, moving along, what about the cell phone calls?
Yes, what about them?
What about those cell phone calls?
Well, the salt one, that's the most famous one from the smoke. There's smoke, and you see white smoke coming into the bathroom, and he thinks there's a bomb on board, and he's yelling, and that has to be a fraud. It has to be wrong.
Before and after the event, I try to make cell phone calls. In fact, before 9/11, I went into the bathroom to do it because I didn't want to be seen. And the technology of cell phones is directed upward, not downward. If you're above the towers, and especially 5-6 miles above, they don't work. Now, mine just kept spinning and never gave me anything at all. Now, what I think is worse is that even if you were in the plane and near a window, you might have a better chance, though it still can't be done. But to go into a cubicle inside a Faraday cage, which is just what a plane is, you're not going to get a signal out. So I don't know what this guy was talking about. Now, I guess there was some statement as to you can do it if there's a density of cell phone towers. Well, I did this going up and down the East Coast. All right? What can be denser than having, Boston and New York and Philly and Baltimore and D.C., whatever, Richmond.
There would be those cell towers all over the place.
Right, and the other thing is, if going at the cruising speed at 35,000 miles an hour, you can't even hook into a certain area, a certain zone for the cell phones. You'd be going through them so quickly, again, that makes it impossible to do. So what about the cell phone calls? Now, I guess there's been a statement to the fact that in the first accounts in the paper, it was seatback phones that went to cell phones that went back to seatback phones. And I don't find that the case. Once again, in the New York Times, the next day, the title of the article is "On Doomed Flight, Passengers Vowed to Perish Fighting." Here's the first paragraph. In a series of cellular telephone calls to their wives, 2 passengers aboard the plane that crashed into a Pennsylvania field instead of possibly toppling a national landmark learned about the horror of the World Trade Center. From 35,000 feet, they relayed harrowing details about the hijacking in progress to the police, and they vowed to try to thwart the enemy, to prevent others from dying, even if they could not save themselves. So here we got Elizabeth Glick going on about talking to her husband on a cell phone. Now, I don't know how it was done. I don't know what was going on. But she claimed, and she never said seatback phone in her first accounts. It's all cell phones. As well as another individual by the name of Burnett. These are cell phone calls. Now what happens is, in August 2004, she has an article written about her, 2 years or 3 years after the fact, and she's going on about the time that she's doing a relating of her husband's narrative. And I'm just going to read you a short part of this, and you can find this in Reader's Digest, September 2004 it is.
Okay.
Said, by now my dad retrieved a cell phone from his car, and my mom had gotten a 911 guy on the line. Now, if you get a 911 guy, meaning obviously 911 emergency, you got that taped. And, of course, there is no tape. All right. Here it goes. This is Elizabeth Glick recounting this. Where are you? The 911 guy wanted us to ask Jeremy. We've turned. We're not going to California anymore, Jeremy said. I'm pretty sure a minute ago we went by Pittsburgh, and I think now we're going south. What do you see? I can see a river. We're flying high, I think. Yeah, we're high up. I think you know that. But you can see it's definitely rural down there. He said there were maybe 30 or 35 passengers. He was calling on the seatback phone, not his cell. He left everything up front when the passengers were herded to the back. For some reason, however, no one was guarding them back there. So now we got her changing the story. And very, I would say, parenthetically to what was going on with this whole situation. So what's the deal, Elizabeth? And we said this time and again. Why the change in the story? I have never seen it go from seatback to cell to seatback. But I've seen it go from cell to seatback. And then the New York Times in the days after goes on with other articles about the wisdom of using cell phones on planes and all this other stuff. Maybe they should ban it. Which is a joke because hardly anybody ever tried because they didn't think or they knew it wouldn't work. Or they were scared to death the pilot, would be somewhat interrupted, I guess, the electronics, and they come back, and it'd be a big scene.
Yeah, it could interfere with the radio communications with the tower because, one time I was on a plane. I was on a little puddle jumper going to New York, and I tried to listen to like a tape on a tape player, and I heard the radio transmissions coming right over, and I said I better turn this thing off, and so I did. But so there's going to be some interference either way, and you don't want to mess with stuff when you're on a plane. And I think that there are. I think that first of all, that is a big thing. And also, you're right. The radio beams from the towers are they're directed downward. They're not directed upward, and they're 6 miles above the tops of the towers when they're in those planes. And that's 6 miles away from any signal as you're going at an incredible rate of speed. So there's no way it could have happened.
And here's the thing also, is that all these accounts of conversations via phone are never recorded. Nobody has ever come to the public and said, this is what I heard, and actually you get to hear it too. And I was saying this to John Gannon, who was on last week, about a lot of these supposed conversations that took place are concocted in this way. And I'll read a paragraph from the LA Times about which I told John refers to how they've got this cell phone conversation from an American Airlines flight attendant by the name of Sweeney. It said FBI officials in Dallas, where American Airlines is based, were able, on the day of the terrorist attacks, to piece together a partial transcript and an account of the phone call. American Airlines officials said such calls are not typically recorded, suggesting that the FBI may have reconstructed the conversation from interviews. Once again, somebody who heard it from somebody who heard it from somebody. And as I've said in past shows, the Associated Press reporter Evan Berlin was present at, I guess that was Princeton, when they were going to play these tapes. And he wrote a short article from it. And I called him and I asked him about it. He was extremely rude and suspicious. That's fine. But I got him finally to admit to me that he never heard a replay of anything. All he did was write down basically what spokespeople told the press. Same thing for Phil Hirschkorn. Same situation. He was a little bit more gracious than Berlin was. But once again, never heard a thing. And the person they brought out to be the spokesperson for the group was this Alice Hoagland, whose son, Mark Bingham, is the one that called her with that ridiculous "Mom, this is Mark Bingham."
Yes.
You believe me, don't you? Yeah, okay, right. But, you see,
if I'd said that to my mother, she wouldn't. First of all, I would have said, Ma, it's me. That's what you say. You don't say, this is Mark Bingham. That's ridiculous. And I know this has been discussed before, but it should be stated again. That's phony.
Mm-hmm.
It's the phoniest thing. Mom, this is Mark Bingham. You don't say that to your closest relatives unless they haven't heard from you in a couple of years.
No, and the thing is, she made the statement and was in that article from which I read that had the account from Elizabeth Glick, and then they bring her out, and she comes out as a spokesperson once again. It's this woman, and people can go and do more research on this. I mean, this isn't really germane to what we were trying to say or state, and that is 93, not a shoot down, not a hijack. Who knows? But it's not a shoot down and not a hijack.
Nobody knows what it is, and anybody who claims they know doesn't. I'm sorry, it wasn't the McGowan stuff. There's a lot of reportage in there, but it in this case, it doesn't hold up.
No, and I won't beat it to death, but let's just say if we're agreed that the Shanksville crater is a dummy site, again, you don't have hijackers. Because what's the purpose? Just let the thing go down and photograph the crap out of it. But that never happened. And it was a shoot down, that's fine. But again, why have another crash site? So, who knows if they had put stuff into that crater to be found with backhoes and ditch witches. Who knows what it was loaded with? Who knows? I don't know. Did they shoot ordnance into that, or did they shoot it someplace else and all of a sudden they discovered this dug situation? Who knows? There's also a little bit of a ramp that goes out of the crater, which would suggest that some ordnance hit and then went up the other side. I don't know. There's even accounts here, Andy, that I read where it said the plane hit in the crater and then was found in the woods.
It's found.
Yeah, it was found in the woods. Well, when did this happen? So anyway, it stinks. We know that, but that's the key to 9/11. They needed that for a lot of reasons, and why wouldn't that be the most controlled situation, not the least controlled? And then they could have whoever those individuals were with all the Alamo stories about what took place that day. Hard to say. But our time is up. Andy Senior from Uticans for 9/11 Truth, and that's what, .blogspot.com?
Yeah, Uticans for 9/11 Truth.blogspot.com, and yep, this show we'll have a link to it as soon as you get the sound file up.
Okay, listen, thanks for being with us. Tomorrow we're going to have on Tom Weiss from New York 9/11 Truth Movement. If all goes well, and Andy, we'll be in touch, and you'll be back on later in the month.
Yes, definitely.
All right, best to Herb, too.
Okay.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye now.